What's your, I finally met my online friend, horror story? I was talking to this girl I met on Quizilla back in 2008/2009. We met because she made one of those, which Twilight character are you, quizzes, and I was asking for help making mine. We got to talking and realized that we were roughly the same age, lived in the same state only a couple hours apart, and had quite a few things in common. Fast forward a few months, I started thinking of her as one of my genuine best friends, and we began to broach the subject of meeting in real life. My parents, understandably, had their doubts and only agreed to let me meet her if I brought my older brother along. I was 13, he was 18. I agreed, and the girl and I arranged to meet at a museum that was equidistant from both of us. So the day comes, and it's finally time to meet this girl I had been talking to for a solid 6 to 7 months. My brother agreed he wouldn't breathe down my neck, but I'd always be within his line of sight. I saw her at the entrance when I walked up, and everything seemed to be going well. After all, she wasn't an 80-year-old man and looked exactly like her pictures, which was really all I could hope for. Later on in the day, my brother met up with us so he could drive us somewhere to get lunch, and everything immediately went downhill from there. This was the first time he had seen her up close, not from a few meters away, and he got this really confused look on his face. He didn't say anything, but stayed pretty much quiet for the rest of the drive. I figured he was just giving us space to talk. When we got to the restaurant, she didn't want to sit on my side of the booth and instead chose to sit next to my brother. She claimed it was because she wanted to be able to look at me while she talked, but my brother looked more and more uncomfortable. I decided to sit next to him instead and didn't give her much choice. Suddenly, the conversation shifted from me and her to just about my brother, what he did for school, where he worked, who his friends were, etc. I started getting really jealous and eventually blurted out, "Are you here to talk to me or just my brother?" She started backpedaling and apologized for ignoring me. At that moment, my brother finally realized where he recognized her from. She had been stalking him on MySpace for the past few months, just without all the heavy filters, makeup, and angles she used in her pictures. He immediately freaked out and told me we needed to leave and that she needed to find her own way home. We left as soon as her parents came to pick her up, and I never heard from her again. And that's the story of how my junior high online best friend was also my brother's weird MySpace stalker. Needless to say, he still brings it up to this day and uses it against me at every opportunity. Back during WoW's second expansion, there was this guy in my guild I had become friends with, mostly through other friends. We talked more and more over time and became fairly close. He had this asshole roommate, and I could hear the guy sometimes, especially when something went wrong during a raid. He would scream and throw fits. He sounded pretty awful. My friend told me he was not just loud and obnoxious, but verbally and sometimes physically abusive, too. I had my own apartment, so I said, "You know what, come stay with me. Just long enough to get you on your feet and into a place that's safe." He showed up at my place with a trash bag full of his stuff and a laptop. I set him up in the apartment and started trying to help him find a job. Well, he did not want a job. He did not get a job, either. He sat in my apartment, day after day, eating my food and slowly draining my savings. No matter how hard I tried to get him motivated, he would just dig in his heels and somehow become more sedentary. Eventually, I told him he had to go. I could not afford to keep him there. He was just couch surfing. I spoke to some people and eventually pieced together that his method of securing a new, temporary, place was playing on the sympathies of his friends to convince them he was in a terrible living situation. It just worked really well on me because he had that loud, obnoxious roommate to play off of. He wound up calling a nearby relative to come get him, I think his aunt. I do not know what he told her I supposedly did, but I have never seen a more venomous look from someone in my life. As far as I know, he moved in with his sister and brother-in-law after that, but frankly, I do not care where he ended up. He also stole a bunch of my stuff. First and last time I do anything like that. I never actually met the guy, but I did speak to him on the phone. We had met on MySpace when I was in college and exchanged email addresses when we realized we supposedly lived in the same town. Eventually, I gave him my phone number and we made plans for him to call me. When he did, his voice creeped me out. It was exactly how I imagined a serial killer would sound. By the time I got past that and felt more comfortable talking to him on the phone, I started noticing other red flags. Whenever I brought up the neighborhood, he would change the subject. At one point, I asked him what his favorite restaurant on the boulevard was and he hedged, so I made up a restaurant and said it was my favorite. He immediately said it was his favorite too and that he especially loved one of their dishes. He went on and on about this wonderful place that didn't exist, and there wasn't a similar one in town, so he couldn't have been confused. I called him out on the fact that he'd obviously never been to my neighborhood. Turned out, he didn't even live in the same state as me. I am an artist, and my main job before the one I have now was selling my work at comic, anime, and video game cons across the US and Canada, and sometimes in other countries. It was surprisingly a lucrative job if you did it right, and I enjoyed it. It required a lot more work than people realized. But I digress. The point is, I was familiar with the convention scene, and this leads me to my next point. I used to take commissions at conventions, but I stopped doing them years ago because I got too busy and my art had improved enough that $100 felt too low for my skill level. I am all about artists pricing their work fairly and not working for pennies. A couple of years ago, just as I had started phasing out commission work, a man approached me at a con. You get a lot of socially awkward people at cons, expected, but 99.5% of them are really sweet and just like to talk about stuff they dig. If you have a good amount of patience, it's enjoyable. But this guy, he immediately asked me if I did commissions. I said no, unfortunately not anymore. He asked me how much my prices were, and usually when people ask, I just quote some arbitrary high number to get them to drop the idea without outright saying no. And if they want to pay it, well, then we can talk. I said $350. He said, cool, done. In cash. I was stammering, not expecting him to go for it. Eventually, I just asked him what he wanted. Long story short, he was looking for furry art, specifically, something a bit suggestive. I had never in my life done furry art, but I knew how lucrative it seemed to be. I said, oh, each character would be extra. NSFW would be extra too. This would be a big commission. He's like, no worries. How much extra? This went back and forth for a while, and to save time, he handed me $700 in cash on the spot for some pretty suggestive furry art. I was not even mad. $700 is good money, so I said sure, I'll do it. I'll fake sign it, get it done, and move on. After I did it in one night in my hotel room, I found he had taken my business card and given my email to his friends who might be interested in commissioning art. The requests got weirder and weirder, but the pay stayed surprisingly good. Eventually, I ended up making a Fur Affinity account under a fake name and tweaked my style and techniques enough that no one could trace the art back to me. I decided to just fully embrace the furry art bank life. It was open season. I guarantee you I was a no-name in that community and still made good money, so I'm horrified to think what the really popular artists get. I didn't feel ashamed for drawing weird furry fetish porn, nor did I feel bad for kind of being a fraud. I provided a service, and that was it. Things went downhill when I mistakenly befriended someone in the community. She was another furry artist, and we just sort of hit it off in the online space. She seemed like an edgy, self-hating furry, so our jabbing humor at the expense of furries made us bond. She was cool, all was well. Eventually, I admitted to her that I was not really into furries, and she took it well. She said she understood why I used the community to make money, because she wished she was not into that stuff either, but you cannot really choose what you like. She told me that if I really wanted to make bank, I should go to a furry convention. I was immediately like, fuck no. Never in my life. But she told me about an anime con that I regularly attended that next year would be sharing the same venue and weekend as a furry convention. Just table hop, she said. She told me to split her table with her, try it out, see how I fared. I already had a table at the anime con, so I was like, sure, why the hell not? What could it hurt? We decided to even share a hotel room. This isn't uncommon. In artist alleys, many artists room together since we have similar schedules and don't tend to party hard because we are working. She seemed like a good person, and it's not uncommon to just meet someone in person when you're rooming with them. I arrived Thursday before the con, but the furry con had already started. I got a text from my friend to come sit at her table in the furry con dealer's den for a few hours since my con didn't start until Friday, just to see if it clicked. She had already checked into the hotel room and had the keys anyway, so I picked up my badge and went. I was surprised to find her at the table, in full fursuit. That was the weird part. She was a self-hating furry, or so she claimed, so to go full commitment and be in a suit was, okay. I was already out of my comfort zone in a sea of furries, and my friend was supposed to be my anchor, my guide through this other world to protect me from this shit. I was immediately on edge. It got worse when I sat down and introduced myself, and she did that thing. That thing furries do where they're in full suits and don't talk. She nodded when I confirmed she was who I thought she was, but she just did the overly exaggerated cute poses and even had a squeaky toy in her suit to make noise. But she didn't say a word. She hugged me, and somehow managed to interact with customers who all knew her and adored her. I guess she was well known in the community, and if she wanted to communicate, she would write or text in this big-ass paw setup. She said she hated wearing suits, but because she didn't have to talk in them, she didn't have to interact much with customers. Okay, that I could kind of maybe believe. Sort of. At around 7 p.m. we packed up to leave and go to the hotel room. She stayed in suit the whole way up. In the room, I flopped down on my bed, exhausted. I asked her if she was going to come out of that thing, understandably a little freaked out from this whole thing. Then she did the thing that made me want to run out of the room, which I didn't, against my better judgment. I had flopped on the bed with the upper half of my body, my feet still on the floor, and my shirt had ridden up my torso. She stepped between my legs and fucking tickled me on my exposed belly. I flipped the fuck out, as one does when sneak attacked by tickles, and wriggled out of her reach. She made that, laughing, pose that furries do where they hold their paws to their mouths bashfully, but still silent as fuck. I was so creeped out. My go-to way of handling stress like that is laughing it off nervously. She got the hint and motion that she was going to take a shower. As soon as she was in the shower, I decided I didn't want to be there when she got out, for now. But instead of lugging all my stuff, I decided I would come back for it, preferably with friends. But I needed a key, so I went to her wallet she had taken out of one of her suit pockets and tried to find the keys I had seen her slip into it. And of course, as soon as I opened it, I just had to see her ID. I was too curious not to, and when I looked at the photo slot, I completely lost it. Whoever was in that ID was not at all who I was expecting. I didn't know super personal details about my friend besides her name, age, and general descriptors, mid-20s, white girl, etc. That was not who was on this ID. It was a man, with long greasy hair, glasses, and stubble, in his mid-40s or early 50s, I'd wager. I was so shocked that I literally tossed the wallet across the room after grabbing the key and ran straight out of that hotel room. I took 15 flights of stairs down to the lobby and called a friend who was coming to the con, freaking out. I never saw the real person under the suit. My friend, a tall burly scary-looking dude, went up for my stuff later that night with the key I'd grabbed. When he came back with all my things, he said there was no one in the room. I stayed with him in his room that weekend and stuck only to the convention my friend didn't have a badge for unless I was with a group outside. The next night, I deleted my Fur Affinity account, blocked my friend on my chat app, and deleted every connection I had to the furry world. The money be damned. I would never venture into that mess again. To this day, that event still makes me sweat, man. I have some really awful, funny, and silly con stories from my time as a traveling con artist, and this, and one other incident, top the list as the worst. I am not sure if this is the right kind of horror story, but it still bothers me many years later. Way back in the day, I met a guy through online role-playing in AOL chat rooms. It was never anything questionable, we just had characters and would play out scenarios together. Eventually, we really got to know each other and the friendship became a long-distance relationship. We would talk on the phone for hours and send each other packages. Our parents spoke at one point, and after chatting for a couple of years, they helped set up for us to meet. Everything went well. His dad brought him to my hometown and we actually got to meet. We saw each other a handful of times after that, too. He was my first relationship and just generally a good friend during a lot of my middle school and high school formative years. Eventually, we broke up but continued to be friends and keep in touch. I always thought I would see him again someday. When I was in my 20s, he had a death in the family and I remember talking to him. 2 or 3 months later, I woke up from dreaming about him at like 4:30 in the morning. I could not sleep, so I went online to send him a message that I figured he would get whenever he was next on. So the horror story part, for me, was that I found out he had been found dead in his apartment a few days before I went to send him that message. He had had a brain aneurysm. It was absolutely crushing to know I had not made it a priority to see him again and that I would never talk to him again. It still really saddens me when I think about it now, several years later. So like 15 years ago, I was playing this game called War Tune, like, really hardcore. Anyway, I met this chick online. We started playing together and eventually Skyping. I was going through a bad phase at the time and was really sad and lonely. Anyway, we kind of fell in love. We decided we wanted to meet up. The issue was, we lived in countries where our passports did not allow us to enter each other's country. This is where it gets weird. I found a job in Greece and moved there. I rented an apartment, and 2 weeks later, she decided to come join me there. When she arrived, she was not what I expected. Turns out she was actually 20 years older than me and had left a son back in her home country. So now, I do not know what to do and just go with the flow. She moves in with me and starts to become psycho crazy. Like, I would wake up in the middle of the night and she would be staring at me. I would Skype with my parents only to have her sitting next to me, out of view, just staring at me for 2 hours. I got scared and told my parents. They freaked out and bought me a ticket back home. I left without telling her, leaving all my stuff in the apartment except for my passport, which I had on me. We are talking about a laptop and all my clothes. Scary shit. Do I ever? Buckle up, y'all, it's a long one. When I was 11, there was a game website that had chat rooms. You could play games with other people and chat alongside the game. There were not a lot of younger kids on the site, and I never usually talked to anyone. Until one day, I saw this kid, we'll call him A, say he was 12, so I started talking to him because I had never seen another kid on the website at that point. We ended up becoming friends and started talking on AOL Instant Messenger. My mom was super skeptical of the whole thing, so we asked him to write my name on a piece of paper and take a picture with it. My mom seemed satisfied after that and never questioned it again. Our friendship was only ever platonic. We stayed friends for about 3 years and kept connected through the game website and MySpace. When Facebook came around, I stopped using MySpace and lost track of him. Cut to a few years later and I'm now in college. I was in a 3-hour class and decided to bring my laptop, which I never did. During our 15-minute break, I checked my Twitter account, which had been inactive for years. I saw a message from A from like 2 weeks before and instantly messaged him back, not believing it was really him. But it was, and we reconnected. He was dating a girl from his hometown but wasn't happy. I was single and away at school, 10 hours from home while my mom was dying from an unknown illness. A was there for me at any hour of the day or night and comforted me when things were bleak. We made plans for New Year's, I live in New York and he lived in Kentucky, to go see the ball drop in the city and finally meet in person, but I was broke and December was really rough for my mom, so I cancelled. I quit school to take care of her, and because I was so busy, we didn't talk as much. I started dating someone and stopped talking to A altogether. It didn't last long, and A messaged me after I changed my relationship status back to single on Facebook. He told me he had also broken up with his girlfriend, and from that point on, we were talking. We would be on the phone for hours, texting all day and night. We would download movies and press play at the same time so we could watch them together. He would call up Starbucks at the mall I worked in and buy me a drink over the phone, then tell me to go pick it up. He connected with my mom on Facebook to wish her well. He was, in my opinion, perfect. And I was falling hard. This went on for months. The week before my 20th birthday, my best friend told me we were going to dinner with her boyfriend and a few of his friends she wanted to set me up with. She knew about A but didn't know it was serious. I wasn't really interested, but she kept bugging me, so I said okay. We go to dinner and A walks in with my best friend's boyfriend instead of one of his friends. My heart dropped into my stomach and started doing the cha-cha slide. He had contacted my best friend weeks earlier and wanted to surprise me for my birthday. He stayed for a week. We went to the aquarium, the beach, he had never seen the ocean, got Slurpees, they don't have 7-Elevens where he's from, went to Dave and Buster's, and paintballing. It was amazing. We kissed the night before he left, and I was heartbroken. He told me he would be back. The next day, he messaged my dad, who I live with, and told him he wanted to be with me and asked if my dad could help him move to New York. My dad, impressed by how well he treated me, told him he could live with us rent-free if he helped out with his business. It was labor-intensive, but A was all in. So he did. A month later, he drove from Kentucky to New York with his dog and all his stuff. The first night, he ran out to his car to get something. Our iPhones were side by side and one of them beeped. Thinking it was mine, I picked it up and saw a text from E, his ex-girlfriend. It said, "I miss my whale nugget." I was confused and kind of grossed out, but he had just driven 9 hours to be with me, so I didn't say anything. The first 2 weeks were amazing. I fell in love, got a new job, had new confidence. My mom was finally doing better. Everything felt good. Then the calls from his mom started. Every day. How could you leave me, my baby? Passive-aggressive Facebook statuses. Messages to me asking where he was. It was a lot. And something in him changed. After a month, he didn't want to sleep in my bed anymore. He chose the couch. He started ditching work to go fishing every day. Didn't want to see my friends. Was always on his phone. 2 weeks later, he told me he had to move back home because his mom was depressed. I was devastated. The next day on Facebook, he was back in a relationship with E. We had never even officially broken up. E messaged me and told me they had never broken up. It was just a break so he could find himself. She sent me screenshots of conversations during the 2 months he lived with me. He made fun of my weight, said how bored he was, and how he couldn't wait to go home. Everything he told me had been a lie. Then he started posting photos of me on Twitter, pictures I didn't even know he took. One was of me sitting with his dog on the couch that he tweeted to National Geographic saying, "Look Nat Geo, a whale is eating my dog." For 10 months, this happened daily. Back then, blocking someone on Twitter only stopped them from tagging you. I could still see everything. I couldn't stop looking. No matter how many times I reported him, nothing happened. He even went through my diary and posted entries on Facebook, where he and his friends and family laughed at me. Eventually, I stopped caring. I stopped checking. I met someone new and moved on. Hindsight really is 20/20ths. I wish I could go back and slap myself for ignoring the whale nugget bullshit. I would have saved myself so much heartache. When I was doing a lot of online dating, I had multiple accounts across multiple platforms. One happened to be FetLife. I used pictures there that I had not put online before, with my face cropped out. It did not pan out, though. I did not really like any of the guys who messaged me. I was polite to them all, but ultimately kind of abandoned my profile. Tinder. I match with a guy who looks white-collar, tailored, professional, just my type. We talk for a week or so until we decide to get drinks. I get to the bar, took an Uber there, and look around, do not see him. Until this scraggly-looking guy comes up to me and says, "Oh hey, I thought you'd never make it." Now, I am not usually one to judge by appearances. We all have rough days, and Lord knows I do not wear makeup or do my hair on the busiest of them, but his hair was significantly longer. Think short, well-manicured hair versus mid-back length uncombed waves. He was covered in a patchy beard, and dressed really badly. I honestly did not recognize him, and he waved it off with, "Sorry. Those pictures are kind of old." Red flag, stupidly ignored. We grab a small table with huge chairs and start drinking and talking. One drink, just to be polite, but I am turned off at this point completely. Then, the kicker. He leans in toward me, puts his hand on my thigh, and says, "You know, after you didn't message me back on FetLife, I'm surprised we matched on Tinder. You really are quite beautiful." At this point I'm like, "I'm sorry." He chuckles, literally chuckles like a villain in a movie, pats my thigh, and says, "I'm going to the bathroom. You should look at your profile and figure it out. I found you because your body is quite distinct." It is worth noting we live in a major international tourist city. There are thousands upon thousands of new people here every day, especially on Tinder. This is not a small town. I used to match with people who would swipe between connecting flights. So I'm beyond nervous. I watch him get up and go, and I quickly check my FetLife inbox, and lo and behold, he had messaged me months ago. His profile picture looked like an absolute serial killer. I remember why I rejected him. Incompatible on all fronts. And I was polite. So anyway, I got to use the whole angel shot protocol. I basically ran to the bartender, explained the situation, and left through the back door. I was beyond uncomfortable and deleted all of my social media for a few months. And I consider myself lucky that he only sent a few "you're a whore" messages for the rest of the evening and gave up after that. And I paid for my own drink, too. I'm not a monster. I met an online friend in person while helping a friend from school move. We had met on an old school roleplay chat and eventually moved to Skyping, since we both liked crafting. We both lived alone at the time, so we would put on movies and sit and crochet or whatever, and that was a big chunk of our relationship. She was 24 and I was 22. She seemed lonelier than me and spent a lot of time bemoaning how she had no friends or money. She had bought a house by herself at 21 and was part of multiple MLMs. I liked her enough that I just politely turned down all her offers to buy weight loss shakes and makeup. She was always angling for me to come visit, so when the opportunity came up, I let her know that I was helping a friend move a few hours away, so we'd be passing through. She graciously offered for us to crash at her place on the way. Turned out, she lived in the middle of this very 50s suburban neighborhood, in a one-bedroom house with no doors on any of the rooms. She had spent all her money trying to live this Facebook mom group life, despite being a single 20-something, so the house itself was basically empty with pillows on the floor instead of furniture. She had no bathroom door or table, but she had an expensive coffee maker and a metric ton of weight loss shakes. She was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag. She never had anyone over, because she barely had friends in real life, so her house was staged to keep up appearances with her mom friends online and not really meant to be lived in. We decided to be polite and make do, but the bathroom was facing the living/bed area in such a way that you had to look directly into the house if you sat on the toilet. Whenever one of us needed to pee or eventually shower, the others just walked outside. Naturally, I got massive stomach cramps at like 3 a.m. and had to crawl up and take the stealthiest, most painful poop of my life while looking over the bodies of my sleeping friends. I met him playing online poker. When I was a freshman in high school, my friend and I would play Texas Hold'em online and go into the chat room just to say dumb stuff and joke around. Ask if a 7 and a 2 were a good hand, that kind of thing. Well, this guy, we'll call him Harry, started joining in with us and getting up to the same antics. We got some dude really mad at us, so my friend and I decided to switch poker tables and go annoy someone else. We invited Harry to come along with us, and he did. From that point on, I became really good friends with him. He lived in a faraway state and was maybe a year or two older than me. We talked online all the time. He was definitely one of my best friends, and I confided in him and trusted him completely. We had a similar sense of humor, and things just made sense between us. I'd tell my real-life friends about him, and he would often talk to them too. I had several other online-only friends that I would just chit-chat with, and it never seemed too weird to me, but I was definitely closest with Harry. There was never anything romantic between Harry and me. Things were always very platonic, but I had always found him attractive. I figured he found me attractive as well, but it really was not important. We finally met in person while I was in college, after years of being friends online. He met me at a public place where I worked. He had a friend that lived in the same city as me and was visiting. He told me I was taller than he expected. Things seemed normal. I went out with him and his friend that night to bar hop. Got pretty drunk. His friend was very entertaining and outspoken. Harry was more my speed. After having a fun night, his friend picked up some loud girl, and the four of us went back to the friend's apartment. We hung out in the living room for a bit, but then the friend went into his bedroom and started loudly hooking up with the girl he had picked up. Harry and I laughed about it. It could have been awkward, but it wasn't. We were both drunk. Something intimate could have sparked between us. But it didn't. I had a boyfriend and wasn't the type to cheat. We spent some time together, and then I caught a cab home. The horror part of this story is that nothing ever came of us. Timing was wrong. Distance was wrong. If this were a movie, we would have gotten together. I like to imagine sometimes that it was. He now lives in the same state as me, but still too far away for it to matter. He's married and lives a much more active life than I do. I've been in the same relationship for several years. The saddest part is we no longer talk. I think we hit a turning point when we met, plus he could no longer handle the emotional instability I went through in my late college years. Still wonder what could have been. A guy I knew in college met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue the relationship. He got a job in her town, or so he claimed, and asked if I'd help him move out there since my car could hold more than he could take on a bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I'd drive him out as a goodbye present, and on the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive, and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up. And, he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job, or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses that he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent video chatting with her were really just him watching her vlog and jacking it. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or a like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, and still doesn't, know he exists. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks a lot about until she showed up and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought they'd meet, she'd fall in love with him, and move back to our college town to marry him, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that.